The mountains surrounding Death Valley are being raised up, and Death Valley itself is being dropped low because the land is literally being pulled apart and huge sections are rolling clockwise to the east.
This is the Exploring the National Parks podcast with Dirt in My Shoes. My name is Ash, and I'm a former park ranger and the founder of Dirt in My Shoes. I think that the parks are best seen from the trail, and I'm here to make national park trip planning easy.
And I'm John. I carry the kids on the trails, I tell stories, and notice all the things that Ash doesn't care about much, like flowers.
Join us as we show you around America's spectacular national parks.
We're sharing our favorite places, fun facts, adventures, and misadventures.
And we'll even throw in a little trip planning.
Let's start exploring. I would like to congratulate Ash.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's deserved.
We're, what are we, a little bit, like 2/3 of the way through October, and she has not yet watched any Hallmark movies.
I am trying to hold out this year. Usually around, when is it? Like usually around mid-October, I start,
itching.
I do.
You start itching to watch.
I do. But I've always been the type of person who really believes that we should celebrate Thanksgiving and then Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
Except when it comes to Hallmark movies. The Hallmark Christmas movies don't count. I can start those whenever. I did already read a Christmas book.
Yeah.
So
I love how we walk through Walmart and we're like, I can't believe they've already put out decorations for Thanksgiving. Halloween's not over yet. Or it's September. School just barely started. They've already got Halloween stuff up. And Ash is like, yeah. Hallmark movies.
Listen, I love Hallmark Christmas movies. One of our favorite traditions every year, and my brother will attest to this, is that we all get together and we pick a Hallmark Christmas movie to make fun of.
Right.
The whole time while we watch it.
Oh my
We've
gosh.
had some good ones. So I allow the boys to come over and watch one with me and make fun of it. And that really is a highlight of the season for all of us.
Last year was the girl goes back to her Amish community and she makes a cookbook or whatever.
Yeah, it was so bad.
It was so great.
So bad.
So great.
Well, that one wasn't even a Hallmark one.
It wasn't?
No. No, it was just a random Christmas one. But then I have my favorite Hallmark movies that I'm looking forward to, their countdown to Christmas, their newer ones and stuff. And I'll go through and I'll save all of those ones, and then I'll just watch them. I kick John out of the room and I watch them by myself because he gets the one movie a year to make fun of, and the rest of them are for me to enjoy.
Oh, man.
It's time. I'm surprised I've lasted this long.
Yes.
Because they've been playing them already for a few weeks. But
yes. So we're always trying to remind people, look forward to next year's trip planning. This is your reminder to look forward to Hallmark movies this winter.
I know. And if anyone
fall.
wants to discuss, I'm here for it. I know.
Nice.
I need a friend who likes Hallmark movies as much as me. So if that's you, message me. I would love to hear that.
That's awesome. Well, speaking of the opposite of love and happy endings, we're going to an awesome park today. That is
was a great segment.
I know. Sometimes I start a sentence. I don't know exactly where it's going to end. I'm a little bit like Michael Scott in that way. And so today we're talking fun facts for Death Valley. But before we talk about Death Valley, we need to talk about Vin Diesel.
Great. Okay.
Yes, the actor Vin Diesel.
Is there another Vin Diesel?
I don't think so. But just
the type of gas that you put in your car.
Yes.
Is also called Vin Diesel.
Vin Diesel number 2. So when actors and actresses are in the news and you're reading the article or whatever, and the author decides that they need to remind you what that person is famous for. Mm-hmm. If it's an article about Jennifer Lawrence, they'll be like, and the Hunger Games star said blah, 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 so they just remind you. Well, I think that people are forgetting Vin Diesel's greatest roles and greatest characters, because every time they refer to him as the guy from Fast and the Furious or Groot from Guardians of the Galaxy. Mm-hmm. And I think those characters are great, but I don't think that either one is his best character. And I do think it would be the best joke in the world for like your tombstone, for just have the words, "I am Groot." I think that would be hilarious for his tombstone. But no, his greatest work, his greatest contribution to mankind, in my opinion, has to be Riddick. And at least that's my favorite. Whenever I think of Vin Diesel, I think of Riddick. And I know Ash has no idea who Riddick is.
No, he's getting blank stares. Here's the thing. I haven't seen any of those movies. I haven't seen Fast and the Furious. I haven't seen Guardians of the Galaxy. Mm-hmm. And I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay. Well, to paint you a quick picture, and for anybody else who might be in the same boat as Ash, Riddick is like the Mandalorian meets Venom and Gladiator all mixed together. And so it's like
a movie?
Riddick?
Or is Riddick his character?
So Riddick is his character, but it's like a series of movies. It's an intergalactic thriller movie series.
Is it called Riddick?
So there's like, one is called Pitch Black, one is the Chronicles of Riddick, and then I think there's another one that's just like Riddick or something.
Never heard of that.
Anyways, there's a reason I'm bringing this up. But he's this awesomely morally gray anti-hero character that you can't just help but think is awesome. Mm-hmm. He's so cool, and his name is Riddick, and originally you think he's human until you see his eyes. And they're like dark and dangerous with like an eerie glow. And eventually you find out that he's actually one of the last members of a warrior race called Furians. Now, during one of the movies, he's captured, and because he's so awesome and dangerous, they decide to send him to a triple max prison on the planet of Crematoria. And true to its name, the planet of Crematoria prompts you to think of death and fire. And with very little atmosphere, this is a planet of extremes, and almost nothing can live here, which is why the prison is buried deep underground. At night, temperatures fall to like negative 300 degrees, but during the day, nothing is safe from the scorching sun with temperatures of over 700 degrees. Okay? And so...
your face is so excited.
Now, no one's ever escaped from Crematoria. And maybe nobody ever will. I'm not going to spoil it for anybody who wants to now Riddick and go see it. But I will say that if there was one person who could escape, it would be Vin Diesel as Riddick. So why do I bring this up? It wasn't just because I want another Riddick movie, because Vin Diesel now owns the rights to the Riddick series, to the character, and so he can do whatever he wants with it. No, I brought it up because of Crematoria. The idea of a planet so extreme just seems unreal, but it's not. The description of Crematoria almost perfectly resembles the planet Mercury.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, there are planets like that, aren't there?
Oh, yeah. Tons of them. And but this is a planet even our own solar system. And so when you're watching the movie, you're thinking, oh, this is so unreal and it's so crazy. But no, Mercury rotates quite a bit slower than Crematoria. But Mercury can be almost 800 degrees during the day and negative 300 at night. And so it's very similar. And I don't know if the creator of the Riddick movies knew that about Mercury when they had the idea for Crematoria or anything, or if it's just like an interesting accident where fiction and reality kind of come together at one point. But it got me thinking about how captivated we are by extreme landscapes in our books and in our movies. Tatooine and Jakku in Star Wars, Mordor in Lord of the Rings, Arrakis in Dune, Crematoria in Riddick, and the list goes on and on. We love seeing extreme landscapes in our movies and stories, but I wonder if we somewhat remove places like that from reality as we think they can only exist in fiction. Well, I'm here to tell everybody that extreme landscapes like that actually do exist. And they're not galaxies or light years away. They're not even continents away. You can find extreme landscapes that resemble the fictional places we see in movies in our own national parks. If you want Mordor or Mustafar, you go to Haleakala or Hawaii volcanoes. If you want Arrakis, you go to Great Sand Dunes. If you want Crematoria or Tatooine, you go to today's subject matter, Death Valley. And I think that there are some things we'll talk about today that you will have a hard time believing, but Scout's honor, this is all the truth, and it's going to blow your mind. So
I am so excited about this because as you were talking, I was thinking, you know, how funny it is. It is true. Like when we see these places on screens, it's like, oh, that's crazy. But I never wanted to go to Death Valley.
Right.
And we talked about this in our exploring episode, how it's just like so low on my list of places to go.
Right.
And I think that's true of a lot of people because Death Valley really does not get very high visitation. It's a huge national park. There's a ton to do, but it's not usually very busy. It's not like somewhere that people are just dying to go to. However, we do really love seeing places like that in the movies.
Yes, exactly.
So I think it's cool that we have this park that we can visit and experience those extremes of temperature and extremes of elevation and extremes of what can live there. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about some of the extremes about Death Valley National Park.
Also, I think they should rename it to Crematoria. I love that name.
Yes, Crematoria National Park.
Yes.
Oh man, Vin Diesel should be he could do his whole next movie just all filmed in Death Valley.
That would be amazing. I love that name. I'm obsessed with that name.
Crematoria.
Yeah.
Yes. So let's jump right in. Fun fact number 1 is that Death Valley National Park is the hottest place on Earth.
And there are some people who will contest this.
Yes.
But it's, as far as I'm aware, the hottest air temperature, right?
Well, we're going to get into that for a second.
You're gonna nerd out on this because I would say people will say that it is the lowest in North America and the driest. Right. But the hottest, I feel like they're always kind of like, well, there was this place in, I think it's Saudi Arabia or something that recorded higher temps or whatever. But we're sticking by the claim that Death Valley is the hottest place on Earth.
Yes, we are absolutely sticking by that.
Okay, I'm so excited.
And I went through the internet and I did find like a list of 10 of the hottest places on planet Earth. But it seems like Death Valley beats everybody by like, at least with the recorded temperature, like 5 degrees.
Nice.
And so the hottest air temperature ever recorded on planet Earth was recorded at Furnace Creek in Death Valley on July 10th, 1913 at 134 degrees Fahrenheit. Which
I don't understand. Like,
that's crazy.
And they have a huge thermometer out front of the Furnace Creek Visitor Center, which is really cool. We've never been there when it's been that hot or even close to it.
We've been there. It's like 76 degrees.
I know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nice.
Feels so good. But I have been to Vegas when it's been like 115 degrees. And you literally feel like you're in an oven and you're watching your skin roast.
Right. Oh,
it's miserable. It's horrible. I cannot imagine 134.
Oh my gosh. It is so hot. But the heat wave that created that record also brought with it 5 consecutive days of temperatures at or above 129 degrees. And so it's just almost a whole week of just like, holy smokes. This place is insane.
Doesn't your car melt at that temperature? I feel like you couldn't even be there.
You can cook eggs like in your car in temperatures way less than this. And
but like, doesn't like your gas
explode? Yeah, you leave your car out and the sun is just going to... Oh, the parking lot at Furnace Creek exploded again today.
Oh my gosh, I know. It's like I'm thinking about it. I'm like, how are they keeping their buildings like functioning and stuff?
This next fact is going to blow your mind. The hottest ground temperature ever recorded on Earth was also at Furnace Creek in Death Valley on July 15th, 1972 at 201 degrees.
Oh my gosh, that's like... what, 2nd or 3rd degree burns if you touched it with your skin?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's so crazy. So the max air temperature that day was 128 degrees.
And that's pretty normal, I would say.
Yeah.
I think like between like 100, like somewhere around 125.
Yeah.
In the summer is pretty standard for Death Valley.
And so if the ground temperature is 201 at a pretty standard summer hot day, do you realize how close that is to boiling temperature?
I know. Like,
at sea
what
level,
if you touched it with your hand.
212 degrees is boiling. So if you wanted to basically cook a spaghetti dinner, you could just put your pot on the ground and you're cooking spaghetti. And it's crazy. It's absolutely insane. So yes, I do think if you laid down on the pavement in Death Valley, you would get severe burns.
Yeah.
And so this place is insane. A couple of records that they have, or at least long stretches of time that they've had. In 2001, Death Valley had 154 consecutive days with a maximum temperature above 100 degrees. And
that's like, what, from like May through September or something? Every day was above 100?
Every single day. In 1996, Death Valley had 105 days over 110 degrees. In 1996, they also had 40 total days above 120. But in 1917, Death Valley had 43 consecutive days with the temperatures 120 degrees or above. And so it's definitely the hottest place on Earth, but it's almost unreal how hot this place is. And you don't realize it until like you're driving through and you're like, oh my gosh, there is so little life that is visible on the surface. Mm-hmm. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And crematoria didn't have very much life on the surface either. It only had like arthropods that like dug deep underneath the earth. And that was the only place they could survive. This place is just like that. It's insane.
It really is. And I do regretfully say that we have not been there in the summer because that just sounds horrible.
Right.
But I would like to go for an hour, maybe. Maybe we'll just go stay in like Lone Pines so we can be in the mountains.
I would like
and then just pop into Death Valley for a second and then leave.
I would like to teleport into Death Valley for an hour and then teleport out.
Some people do visit in the summer.
I know.
I can't imagine you would be able to do anything.
It's because I think you just want to experience the heat.
Yeah.
That's why you would do it.
But I really seriously would be afraid of my car melting.
Oh my gosh.
Melting against the pavement or something.
What
I don't know.
What do you tell your mechanic? You know, I'd like to do a pre-trip tune-up, but I would like it to be tuned up to 130 degrees.
I need my vehicle to withstand 130 degree temperatures.
Could you put a space shuttle like shell over the paint job or like
whatever they use on the rockets that come back in to keep them from burning up? I feel like you need some of that.
I know. I'd like a re-entry tune-up for my car, please.
I know, but I do think we will go sometime in the summer just to see what it's like. But the problem is like
we'll go in a rental car. That's what we'll do. Yeah. It won't be our own vehicle.
We'll just rent something in Vegas or we'll drive down there and then rent something to go into Death Valley. We decided we were going to do that next time we drive dirt roads in there too.
Right.
Because it messed up our truck. But maybe rental car is just the way to go.
Yes.
I wonder if they have a disclaimer on there. You know how they don't let you take rental cars on dirt roads?
Yep. Please don't take our car into Death Valley during the summer.
But a lot of things close down too.
Yeah.
That is definitely not main season in Death Valley. And I think actually I'm surprised at how many people don't realize that this is not a summer park. Mm-hmm. This is a winter park. You go during the winter, that's when everything's open. That's when you can camp. That's all the stuff, you know, but a lot of people I think don't even actually realize how hot it starts getting. Like the season, the off season starts like the end of April, beginning of May, and lasts until like October, November.
Right.
So,
oh man,
because of that dang heat.
Yes, we used to sell cars, and people would always ask me like, "Where did this car come from? Like, has it been through hail? You know, has it been through people?" It's right around Katrina. People were always like, is this a Katrina car, that was submerged in water? I feel like people should be asking if they buy cars around Vegas, is this a Death Valley car? Has this been into the extreme? I'd like to check out the rubber components of the engine.
I know. I'm really interested to know what it does to your car at that temperature. Because I know what can happen to your skin.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, it was only like 1:15. I was in Vegas for a week for a piano competition in the summer. I never would choose to go to Vegas.
Right.
In the summer. But I was there for a piano competition, and we would wait until like midnight to go out and go shopping and be on the strip and stuff because it was just way too hot during the day.
Yes. So that's an awesome fun fact. Folks, this is the hottest place on Earth. And it totally lives up to that throughout the whole summer season and beyond into the other shoulder seasons. But let's move on to fun fact number 2. And Ash mentioned this, but Death Valley is the driest place in North America. Death Valley gets an average of less than 2 inches of precipitation a year, which is crazy.
And I would venture to guess that because what a lot of people don't realize, and maybe we'll talk about this when we talk about the elevation, but there are some huge mountains around the valley.
Right.
And so I'm not sure if they're including those 2 inches as like wetlands in the mountains and doesn't even hit the valley floor, or if that's valley floor precipitation.
I think it's all included.
Yeah, because I was going to say, I think 2 inches sounds like a lot once you've been there.
Right. Exactly.
I can't imagine it having, but I think it does, like most of it probably lands in the mountains because those mountains have snow when you go in the winter.
Right.
And then you can see, as you drive around, you can see all the channels where that water just like, there's no plant life to suck in that water into their roots. And so everything is just like channels of erosion down these mountains and into the valley.
It's so cool. It's an amazing place. And there's a lot of the factors as to why this is the hottest and the driest place. And so we're going to kind of get into that. But in couple of records, I guess, here. In 1929 and in 1953, nothing. There was no precipitation. No rain was recorded. The driest stretch on record was through 1931 to 1934. Through those years, there was a 40-month period where Death Valley only got 0.64 inches of total rain.
Sheesh.
And that's more than 3 years.
Yeah.
They didn't even get an inch. Just barely more than an inch. And so I could sweat more rain than they got. And I have in Death Valley. The visitors.
You're not the sweater. I'm the sweater. If anyone wants to know how unladylike I am, if you see me hiking next to John, who actually is a very clean and good smelling man.
Thank you.
And then there's me beside you, and I'm just like dripping sweat, and I smell, and I'm gross. And I'm like, man.
Ash is like, John, I need a drink. And I help her take off her backpack.
You're definitely the sweater. And it feels so gross. Like, I'm like, oh, why? The girl shouldn't be the one who sweats like this. It just seems so unfair.
You glisten a lot.
I don't.
You're an overachiever in glistening. A glistening achiever.
It's not even close to glistening. You glisten.
I do. I'm a great glistener. Shiny is about me. That Moana song is about me. I'm so shy. Oh, man. But anyways, yes, this place, extreme hot and extreme dry. One of the most extreme places on planet Earth for this. But I think my big question is why? Why is Death Valley so hot and dry? Because we just mentioned Vegas. It's super hot, but it doesn't reach 134 degrees hot.
I know where you're going with this, but I do also want to say that it might not seem like it's been as dry as it normally is over the past few years because they have had some bigger monsoonal rains come in and create a lot of flash floods, like almost every year for the past 3, 4, 5 years.
Right.
Like some road has been totally destroyed by flash flooding and this trail is gone and this trail is gone. Like, oh, and they had the lake in Badwater Basin this past winter.
Right.
A lake that people were kayaking on. And it's just like, that's like unfathomable.
Yeah, exactly.
If you've been there during a normal time. So I would just say like the past few years, they have been getting more water.
Right.
At Death Valley. And probably still not that much more. I mean, maybe like 3 inches. You know what I mean?
Exactly. But 3 inches.
It doesn't soak into the ground. It just runs down in the valley and stuff. So
yeah, we talked a little bit about this in the previous Exploring Death Valley episode, but how like Death Valley is naked. And so naked of vegetation in a lot of ways. And so when it rains, those flash flooding is a real problem with the tiniest bit of rain.
But I do feel like it's been worse.
Yes.
I mean, it started with like Scotty's Castle up in the northern part. That happened, I think, in 2015.
Yeah.
So I was so bummed. That was the first year we went to Death Valley, but the castle had already been flooded, so we didn't get to go in. And they've been trying to get it fixed, and floods just keep happening. Things keep happening. They haven't ever had it open since then. But then, like a couple years ago, Titus Canyon, now you can't get in there because of flooding. Darwin Falls, that trail has been closed. The road is washed out. The Salt Creek Interpretive Trail, all of those boardwalks got washed out. I mean, there's some pretty popular spots in Death Valley that even right now you can't get to because of these flash floods that have happened in the past few years.
Right. And so not only is this the hottest and driest environment, it's so extreme, but you add any bit of moisture and it becomes dangerous as well. And the whole landscape can just completely change because that water, that tiny bit of water, will congregate in those channels and just tear everything apart.
And like you said, it only takes a little bit of water. It takes one storm.
Right.
And park roads are closed because they've been washed out.
Right.
So I think that's what I love about Death Valley is, you know, beyond like the temperature and the low precipitation and the extreme elevations, just all of those 3 things combined, but then just like sitting there and looking out at this landscape, everything is so like, this place wants to kill me. You really do feel that. I think you feel that in so many different ways while you're there that it makes it just feel like this huge adventure that you're on. Like, I am in this place that just wants to destroy everything.
Well, that's exactly like if your car does have a problem, you have a real problem.
Yeah.
You know, because if you're stranded in Death Valley, if you don't have water, if, you know, you can't sit in your car because it'll get extra hot too. And so the shelter is a real problem.
No shade.
No shade. There was a movie, a John Wayne movie, I think it was called The Three Godfathers. And they filmed a lot of it in Death Valley. But basically, as the movie goes on, just character after character just drops dead in Death Valley.
Oh my gosh.
And so it's just, this place really could just...
Or it's like in holes, how no one wants to run away. Because if you run away, you're basically dead.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how it feels. It's like you go off the main path or you go away from Furnace Creek and it's like, am I going to die out here?
It's a real possibility in this park. You have to come prepared.
Yeah.
And it's super cool. But let's get back to my question.
Okay.
Just for a second. Why? Why is this place so hot and so dry? Because something that I think is amazing to point out to people is that Death Valley, if you see pictures of it, and we're even talking about it, you think that it's part of this massive, almost unending desert. But Death Valley is like 100 miles from Mount Whitney. And Mount
Whitney.
Yeah.
It's like, it's in the Sierras. It's beautiful. It's the highest peak in the lower 48 state.
Exactly. And Mount Whitney is on the east side of Sequoia National Park. And so even if you go just a little bit further west from Mount Whitney, you cross the Sierras to the west side, the conditions are so different. And the conditions...
Because you've got the sequoia trees that are growing, these massive, massive trees that are just, I mean, I would be interested to know it, like as the bird flies, how many miles it is to those sequoia trees versus Death Valley. It can't be that far. You've just got a giant mountain range.
Exactly. Well, I did kind of some calculations to try to figure out as the crow flies, you know, how...
I said as the bird
flies. The bird flies.
It's as the crow flies.
I would like to specifically designate it as the crow, or the California condor would be cool.
Yeah, but that would be faster, probably.
Yeah. As the California condor flies. It's probably less than 140 miles from Death Valley to the nearest sequoia grove. The conditions where the sequoias are so wet and mild that the largest trees on planet Earth can grow there, the largest by volume. And so it's just so different. And like, it's hard to fathom why.
But like we said, I mean, they are so close to each other. If you look at the map, you see Sequoia on one side and Death Valley right over barely east of Sequoia.
Like to kind of put it in perspective, that's only like a little bit longer than Long Island. The distance between like, I don't know, Brooklyn and Montauk, basically, for Long Island. And so that's the difference between Death Valley and the Sequoia Grove. And so it's absolutely, like, it boggles the mind a little bit. So how and why is Death Valley so hot and dry? It doesn't make sense, but it's all about location and geology. And it's mostly the geology in my mind, which is weird because how can rocks affect weather? It doesn't.
Oh, so much. So much.
Yeah, they do. But not.
And this is something that you'll find in the West a lot. So I definitely know why Death Valley is so dry.
Yeah.
But maybe if you're from the East or the Midwest, East, you might not be aware that this is even a thing that happens quite a bit out here. It's just Death Valley happens to be very extreme.
The most extreme example of it. But so the rocks don't really affect the rain in like a healing crystal kind of a way, you know, where you can wear a certain crystal around your neck and, you know, you affect the weather. It's not like that. It's more like it's affecting the weather tectonically. And so before we talk about why it's the hottest, let's talk about why it's the driest. And it's called the rain shadow effect. And the rain shadow effect actually applies to mountains and deserts all over the world. It's not just a Death Valley phenomenon. Now, whether or not you can see it or feel it, there's always some amount of water in the air around you. We call it humidity. And the more humid it is, the more water vapor there is in the air. The less humid it is, the less water vapor there is in the air. Now, let's say you have a bunch of warm, humid air, and you take that air and you add wind and a mountain. As the wind pushes that warm, humid air at the mountain, a few things will start to happen. As the air gets pushed up the mountain and the elevation increases, the temperature will start to drop. And as the temperature drops, the water vapor in the air will start to bunch together. This process is called condensation, and as the water condenses, it gets heavier and falls to the ground as either rain or snow. But the wind will keep blowing regardless of what the water in the air is doing. And so the wind pushes the air higher and higher, and it's getting colder and colder, which causes condensation, which causes rain and snow to fall, and then boom, the air finally reaches the top of the mountain, hits the peak, and then the wind blows it down the other side. Except that now, the humidity in the air is significantly reduced. Most of it fell on the other side already as rain or snow. So now as the wind blows the air down the other side, not only has it already lost most of its water content, but as it goes down in elevation, it's getting warmer and warmer, which means the opposite of condensation is happening, and it becomes less and less likely that whatever water there is remaining in the air will ever turn into rain or snow. And so that's called the rain shadow effect. And what it creates is a very wet side of a mountain and a very brown, dry, deserty side of a mountain. And you can see this all around the world, especially in areas where you have warm, humid air and pretty consistent prevailing winds from one direction. Like California.
Because you've got the coast and all that wind blowing. And so a lot of the coastal areas in California have a lot of fog and have a lot of water content.
Yep.
And then it blows it into the Sierra Nevada mountains.
Yep.
There's huge mountains over there.
Yep.
And it hits them. And that's why the sequoias, they're able to grow on that side because it drops so much water.
Yeah.
And so much snow on that side of the Sierras.
Right. Almost all of it. Because
and then it goes up and over, and you've got, like you said, Mount Whitney's right there. The tallest mountain goes up and over Mount Whitney. And then what do you have? You have Death Valley.
Right. Exactly.
And there's no water in the clouds anymore.
Exactly. And so just imagine the air coming off the Pacific is like a sponge. And there are 4 mountain ranges between Death Valley and the Pacific Ocean. And so as the air goes up and over these consecutive mountains, it's like squeezing a certain amount of water out of that sponge. And then the Sierras are like the biggest wrenching of that sponge that you could possibly imagine. And that's why the sequoias can grow there. And then it comes down the other side and there's nothing left in that sponge. And that's why Nevada, the whole state of Nevada, you can see this happening all up and down the Pacific coast, into Oregon, into Washington.
Oh my gosh, Eastern Oregon is like, if you've been on the Oregon coast and then you drive into Eastern Oregon, it's like, what happened? This place is so brown.
Yeah.
It's got the huge Columbia River going through it, but nothing else is alive. And yeah, I mean, there are so many places along that spine.
Yeah.
Where it's just like, oh my gosh, like this place got really desolate really fast.
Really fast. It's almost hard to imagine how fast it is, because if you're driving from Portland going east, you're going along the Columbia River Gorge. It's like green, 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 you know, where they filmed Twilight and everything is just so green. And then all of a sudden it's just like...
I love how that's why the Columbia River Gorge is famous to us. That's where they filmed the Twilight movie.
That's where they played the baseball game. You know, it was awesome.
That's where they run through the trees.
Yes, exactly. But then you get to the east side and you're just, it's not even the full east side.
Like a wah, wah.
It's
like,
crazy.
oh my gosh, what happened here?
Yeah, but Nevada, honestly, they call it the silver state because they found so much silver, you know, when they were mining and everything. They could call it the rain shadow state.
Shadow state, because the whole state is basically a rain shadow of the Sierras.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that is why Death Valley is so dry. But it's just the most extreme version of a rain shadow effect that you can ever imagine. Yeah. It's just so dry. But like we mentioned, the hotter the air gets as it comes down the mountains, the less likely it is to drop any precipitation either, because the opposite of condensation is happening. The air molecules, the water vapor molecules in the air are spreading out. It just gets way less likely to rain. And so here is where heat and dryness kind of spiral out of control in a way, because the hotter it is, the drier it is, and the drier it is, the hotter it is, and they just kind of feed off of each other. But why is it so hot? Because like we mentioned, Eastern Washington, Eastern Oregon, almost all of Nevada is affected by this rain shadow effect. So how come all of it is in 134 degrees?
I'm guessing it has to do with the elevation that the air can drop.
Yeah. So,
am I wrong?
No, you're not far off, but there's even more to it than that.
Okay, interesting.
Okay, so let's get to fun fact number 3, which very much affects the other 2 fun facts about it being the hottest place on Earth and the driest place in North America. Fun fact number 3 is that Death Valley National Park is the lowest place in North America. Badwater Basin in Death Valley sits 282 feet below sea level, which is so cool.
It is so cool.
It's hard to believe, actually, because, well, we'll get into this, but how does that affect the temperature, Ash? You know, well, it's not just how far below sea level it is that affects the temperature here. It's the whole picture. It's actually the depth and the shape of Death Valley. The valley is really long and narrow, with a basement elevation of 282 feet below sea level. But it's walled on both sides by huge mountains with tall, jagged peaks. Telescope Peak on the west side of Death Valley is over 11,000 feet tall.
It blows my mind.
Yeah.
Because you can see Telescope Peak so well from Badwater Basin. Mm-hmm. So you are literally standing in negative 282 feet below sea level, staring up at an 11,000 foot mountain.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Like, the relief on that mountain is just massive.
It's kind of staggering to realize what you're looking at.
Yeah.
And how big of a difference that is. Because basically what that means that Death Valley is it's like a chasm in the earth, thousands of feet deep. And it almost never rains. And because it never rains, the sun is allowed to just beat down on the actual surface of the earth with no plants to protect it. And so during the day, the rocks and the sand are subjected to a continuous and brutal onslaught of solar energy.
And that those rocks are just holding that heat.
Yep, exactly. We talked about the ground temperatures that can get crazy to near boiling temperatures. Yeah. And so as you have the heat coming from the sun, the ground is absorbing the heat and then it radiates it back. And so then you just have this temperature spiral where things just get hotter and hotter during the day.
As that air moves its way down the mountains into Death Valley, it's being heated not only as it's dropping elevation, but also as all that heat is reflecting back up into the air.
Right.
From the ground.
It's a superheating process.
Yeah.
But then we think, but then it should cool down at night. When night comes, you should get some type of reprieve. But if you've been there during the summer and you're camping, you're sorely disappointed because the shape of the valley, the heat literally gets trapped inside the valley. And so, sure, the absence of the sun beating down will cool it down a bit. But most summer nights, the temperature only dips to like 85 to 95 degrees.
Oof.
And so the heat...
I cannot imagine you just want a hammock, but there's no trees.
Oh man, even a hammock is too much. Yeah. You don't want anything to touch you.
Lay on a tarp.
I know, so bad. You just want to get your blanket wet, with ice from your cooler, and then just lay on the floor. But the floor, it's like a hot plate.
Yeah, I was gonna say being on the ground probably is really hot. You just need a cot that's above the ground with no blankets, and put some ice in your cot before you lay on it.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. Okay, so the heat here, it just doesn't dissipate. And it doesn't escape like what does in most deserts, because what's normal just doesn't apply. It doesn't apply to Death Valley. It's so extreme because the depth of the valley and its mountain walls, they trap the heat in and acts like a convection oven or like an air fryer. So most of the time in most deserts, Joshua Tree, you go to the Utah deserts, well, even they have mountains, but it's not the same chasmly shape.
Well, and that's my favorite thing about going to the desert is it's hot at night, but here in Utah, when you're in southern Utah, those evening temperatures in the desert are perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. It's the best time to be out. Mm-hmm. You feel so good.
Sometimes it's even a little chilled.
Yeah, and it's beautiful, and it's just this is why I'm here.
Right, exactly. All the other deserts, they have more vegetation than this.
Yeah.
And so they're not as much solar energy is heating the ground and not as much as radiating back, even though it can still get crazy hot. But then you don't have the mountains trapping in the heat on both sides. And so the heat can rise because heat always rises, right? Heat rises and then it kind of spreads out and dissipates. And then the cool air is allowed to come in and cool down everything. That's what happens in most deserts, but not here because the heat recycles itself back into itself. And I'll explain why. So the mountains here in Death Valley, I've mentioned it over and over again. They trap everything in because it's got this closed convection system. The heat rises, but because the mountains are so tall, the heat can't escape into the broader atmosphere. Instead, what happens is they rise to a certain elevation, they cool just enough that it stops rising, and then it recycles back down. It cools and it falls back down in elevation. And so you have this circulating effect that's happening inside the mountains, inside the valley, in Death Valley, and nothing gets up and out into the broader atmosphere. But that cooling air, it only cools a couple of degrees. And so it rises. You've got 120 degree, 130 degree air rising up out of the valley. The sun's gone. It's rising up. It cools to maybe 115. It stops rising. And then it falls back down into the valley where it's then reheated by the hot plate of the surface of the earth. And then it rises up again. And maybe it drops to 110, and then it falls back down, and then 105, 100, and that circular. But by the time the sun comes back up in the morning, it's only 90 degrees. Yeah. And so during the summer, this superheating process, there's nothing to interrupt the superheating process, which is different from all of the Great Basin mountains. It's all different from Eastern Oregon, Eastern Washington, where everything can escape into the broader atmosphere and it can cool down to maybe 60 to 70 degrees.
Resets itself before the next day happens.
Exactly.
That does not happen in Death Valley.
No, it's it gets a head start every single morning.
It's so nice in the winter, though.
Oh, it's so
Because
great.
then your temperatures, I mean, like we said, it's like 75, 80, and at home it's 20.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why we love Death Valley in the winter, because it's like, man, it's so warm here.
It really,
so good.
that convection oven process really works in your favor in the wintertime.
Yeah, it does.
But it'll kill you in the summertime.
Yes, it will.
And so we've kind of answered why it's so hot and dry. But why is it so low? Ash, can you think of any reason? Like, is it glaciers? Is it river erosion? Why is Death Valley so low? I put you on the spot here, and I love to do that.
I can't imagine it being any of those things.
Right.
So I'm trying to think of if it has something to do with tectonic plates pulling apart, or if it has something to do with a hole in the ground that collapsed. I don't know. I can't imagine it having enough water for any type of water erosion.
Well, right, because Badwater Basin, it's a closed basin, right? It's salty because there's no outlet.
Right.
Right? And so it can't be a river system. And it's so dang hot, like, you can't imagine there being glaciers.
I can't. I mean, maybe millions of years ago.
Uh-huh.
But,
Exactly.
okay, what is it?
Okay, so in order to answer this question, we're going to refer to one of the great mind-bending movies of our time, Inception.
Oh, I saw that movie once,
Mm-hmm.
and I did like it.
It's awesome.
But I don't remember anything about it.
Yes, it's such a fun movie, but geez, it got my imagination
I need
going.
to
Like,
see that one again.
it's so
That's
good.
one I don't watch a lot of movies, but
Mhm.
I do remember liking that one.
Oh, I'm not going to spoil anything for you, but that movie, I mean, is he? Isn't he? You know, it's if you know.
See, that doesn't even ring a bell. John always says that I can rewatch movies as much as I want and never remember that I've actually seen that movie before. And
I
it's
know.
totally true. If I were to watch that movie again, it would be as if I'd never seen it.
Right,
I'd be
exactly.
surprised. Like, the suspense would still be killing me. Like, I don't know. I get to enjoy everything multiple times because my brain does not remember.
Oh my gosh, you're a short-term miracle, a shorter-term memory miracle, Ash.
I am when it comes to movies. I never remember if I've seen that movie or not, or what happens.
I know. It's awesome. It makes it really fun for me. Okay, but we're going to describe one of the scenes from the movie. It's really awesome. Leonardo DiCaprio is looking to hire an architect. He needs somebody fresh-minded and creative to design not a building, but a dream. And so he goes to Paris to find an old teacher for a recommendation. He soon meets this girl, Ariadne. He sits down with her at this beautiful little cafe in Paris to teach her the basics. And he starts out by saying, "They say we only use a fraction of the true potential of our brains, but they're talking about when we're awake. While we dream, the mind performs wonders. In a dream, your mind creates and perceives a world simultaneously, so well that you don't feel your brain doing the creating." And then he looks at her and he asks her, "How did we get here?" And then she realizes they're already in a dream, and one that is hers, and it's her dream that she created. And then everything explodes. And it's really cool. But that was just her first time building a dream. In the next scene, she tries again. And this time, she's recognizing that it's her brain doing the creating. And they're walking around Paris in her dream. And everything that she's creating, and it's beautiful and it's super real. And then she learns more about how it works. And then she says, but my question, Leonardo DiCaprio, is...
Not know his character name.
I think it's Cobb, but I wasn't
but
quite
we
sure.
love Leo, so...
Yes, so Leonardo, my question is, what happens when you start messing with the physics of it all? And then they stop right there on the sidewalk, and they watch. And Leo's looking at her, and she's looking at the horizon, and they're both watching as the horizon changes. Buildings miles away and out of sight because of the natural curvature of the earth start coming into view. It's like gravity is reversing, or it's like Paris is being folded beautifully until finally the part of Paris that was far away is now resting upside down right on top of you where the sky once was. And then Ariadne says to Leonardo DiCaprio, "Isn't this something?" And he responds, "Yes, it is." And I remember the first time that I was sitting in the theater, I was like, whoa. But that's crazy. This is stuff that can only happen in movies, right? Wrong. And then I was like, well, kind of. Yeah, you can't turn Paris upside down on itself. That's not going to quite work. Despite trying, I actually did try to, when I was doing this, I tried to move a rubber band with my brain.
If anyone could do it, it'd be you.
I thought for sure that it would twitch just a little, but I'm working on it. I thought for sure I was at least Force sensitive.
Were you in a dream, though?
I was not.
That's probably your problem.
Okay.
You need to build your dream first.
That's true.
We'll try it again.
All
You
right.
can try it again after this.
I'll give it a shot. But for now, it might be worth bending our minds just a little bit to tweak Ariadne's question a bit. Does it look like something is messing with the physics of it all? And in Death Valley, I can definitely tell you yes. A lot of the fun facts episodes, we've talked about how mountains are made. We've talked about magma plumes and continental collisions and volcanoes and lots of other cool geologic mechanisms. But this was pretty new. And this is like Leonardo DiCaprio
The
said.
suspense is killing me.
This is something.
What happened?
So fun fact number 4 is that the mountains surrounding Death Valley are being raised up, and Death Valley itself is being dropped low because the land is literally being pulled apart and huge sections are rolling clockwise to the east.
Explain.
It sounds and looks like somebody is messing with the physics of it all. If we were able to stand in Badwater Basin in Death Valley and we could fast forward or rewind time, we would experience something like that mind-bending Paris scene. The earth literally rotating under your feet so that you go down super low, and on one side of you, the horizon is being lifted up to over 11,000 feet in the sky. And so that's nuts. It's almost, the Paris scene takes it a little bit further where it actually puts it right directly on top of you. But here in Death Valley, one side is literally being twisted down while the other is being twisted up. And so it's even continually happening now. Badwater Basin is still steadily dropping downward.
How, though? I don't understand. Does it have to do with the plates?
So here's the explanation. We've talked about how tectonic plates can push mountains up when they smash together, right?
Right.
But how could it work when the land is pulling apart? Well, it looks like it started about 3 million years ago. Something changed. Some type of tectonic pressure changed because whatever geologic structure underlies this whole area started getting extended or stretched. And instead of just breaking apart, the land is trying to hold itself together the best that it can. And so the rotating action is actually holding everything together. Imagine that you've got some blocks, kind of like the square blocks that you had when you were a kid, right? Just building blocks. Now, Ash, here's a math question. If you have a square, you're looking at a square drawn on a piece of paper. Where is the square longest?
Diagonal.
Diagonal, because from flat side to flat side, it's the same. But if you go from bottom left to top right, the square is at its longest point, right?
Right.
Okay. Now imagine you have a bunch of those square blocks, and they're all placed right next to each other on the floor with no gaps between them. They're not stacked on top of each other or anything, just one solid layer across the floor. Now let's say the floor starts to stretch underneath the blocks. If you don't do anything, none of the blocks will be touching each other and there will be gaps between each of them, right? Mm-hmm. How do you keep the blocks touching each other and keep the gaps from appearing? You rotate the blocks diagonally. And that so that they can still touch each other despite the stretching action happening underneath them. It won't work forever, but for a while you can keep all of the blocks connected. And so you have this entire floor, basically, where you've got all of these building blocks. The floor is stretching them out, apart from each other, but all of them are rotating diagonally so that the points are touching each other, basically. And so that is what's happening underneath Death Valley National Park. The earth is being stretched, but in order to keep everything from just breaking up, the blocks are rotating towards the east, stretching out diagonally, keeping everything together. Telescope Peak is the top left corner. If you're looking at the block, just looking straight at it. Telescope Peak is the top left corner of the block. Badwater Basin is the top right-hand corner of the block. And as you rotate it to the right, Telescope Peak is going up and Badwater Basin is going down.
That seems very abstract to me. Like, you described it really well. I'm still trying to figure out how that's happening, because we just went to Iceland. It's not like a rift valley, like
right.
where two plates are coming apart and then it's like stretching the land in the middle apart, right? It's not
somewhat
like that.
It's somewhat of that same action, but it's just a different reaction.
Instead of it ripping apart and dropping,
right,
it's twisting, so one part's getting higher and one part's getting lower.
Correct. So
interesting.
It's a very similar process. So the one in Iceland is two separate tectonic plates pulling apart from each other.
Right.
This one is one
tectonic plate that's stretching.
Right. So it's trying to keep itself together.
Okay.
And so that's why, instead of just like breaking apart and it's no big deal, these tectonic blocks, these geologic blocks underneath Death Valley are trying their best to keep themselves together. So they're stretching themselves, turning themselves so that the diagonal sections can keep touching. But that's the action that raised Telescope Peak up on one side and dropped Badwater Basin on the other.
Interesting.
And so it's totally new to me.
Yeah, we've not talked about anywhere where that's happened.
No, it's super interesting, but it does seem a little bit like that Inception scene.
Right.
Where it's like, oh my gosh, it would all have to happen in fast forward or rewind, where you just watch one side of the earth get raised up above you and you wonder if it's going to keep going.
Right.
You know, and it's so cool.
It's dropping behind you.
Yeah. And Badwater Basin is continually, it's still dropping.
Crazy.
And
Badwater Basin is so cool too. The only way that you know you're below sea level is the little sign on the cliff above the parking area. So make sure you find that, because otherwise you just feel like you're at a normal elevation.
Right.
I would say it is kind of abstract to be thinking I'm almost 300 feet below sea level right now, because it doesn't look like you are.
Yeah.
Until you see the plaque and you're like, oh, cool.
Yeah, exactly. And then you just imagine yourself being twisted deeper into the earth.
Yeah.
Where you're standing is rotating deeper into the earth. Riddick would think it's pretty cool.
Probably.
At least Vin Diesel, but probably
maybe not Riddick.
Exactly. Okay, so we just covered a whole lot of science. You know, this is the hottest place on Earth. This is the driest place in North America, the lowest place in North America, and some of the factors that go into making that possible. Some of the scientific and geologic factors that make that all possible. For fun fact number 5, let's talk a little bit about the life. Okay. Some of the life that's here. And I think when people visit Death Valley today, they see it and think, how could anything live here? The conditions are so hard. They're too harsh for things to live. Well, despite the impossibility of it, the hottest, driest, and lowest place, people lived here.
Yeah.
Lots of people.
I don't know why you choose to do that, but...
I mean, there's an amazing human history here. You have miners, you've got all of these people that tried to settle here. There's so much history. But I want to talk about the native people that lived here, because the fact that they could live off the land generation after generation is astounding to me. And the people that lived here are called the Timbisha Shoshone people. They adapted their lives to live with the heat. And they would move between the mountains and the valleys, you know, depending on the seasons.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Why you would stay in the bottom of the valley year round. And a lot of native peoples were travelers and nomads that traveled with the food source or with the water or with the stuff that they need. So that makes sense, because there are mountains around, like we mentioned. Telescope Peak has snow on it during the winter.
Yep.
it gets much cooler up there. So yeah, if I was a Native American that lived in that area, I would for sure be in the mountains during the summer.
Yes.
And then you could go down in the valley and be okay during the winter.
Exactly. Now, these people amaze me. They had their entire life that was adapted to living in this place. They knew how to live off the land. They knew what springs were reliable, which ones weren't. They knew how to find food and how to make shelter and just have a thriving community. But as settlers and prospectors came through the area, their lives changed quite a bit. They began to work in different industries that came through. Soon, as with many other Native tribes, settlements and mining claims began to encroach on them.
Yeah, and that's really sad. There's a lot of mining history in Death Valley, so I can imagine that would be very disruptive to the Native peoples who already live there.
Well, because a lot of mining operations require at least some water, and so if you tie up all of the water in your mining operation, this was a place that people relied on for generations. You've kind of screwed up the system a little bit. But they were a pretty small tribe, which caused some problems. In 1933, when Death Valley National Monument was established around them. And what's ridiculous is that as we look back at those years, a lot of times we cringe at how many people were forced onto reservations.
Yeah.
But because they were so small, they were somewhat overlooked. And because they weren't
given a reservation,
right?
They just made the national monument around it.
Exactly.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and the fact that the Timbisha Shoshone were not forced onto a reservation meant that they were not federally recognized as a tribe, which meant that they didn't qualify for federal oversight and assistance. And so it's kind of a catch-22.
Right.
You're losing your land because you're not in our system, but being in our system means that you lost your land, and we can't help you because you're not in our system.
Oh,
so
I don't know what's better.
I know, exactly. And so
it's good, but
and so the Timbisha Shoshone people ended up in this situation where they're like, we're here, guys, and the park staff for decades just wanted to get rid of them. And or at least they would try to make things so difficult and uncomfortable that they would voluntarily leave. And so they built them housing, but then when they left the housing in the valley to go to their wintering grounds, or wherever, they would migrate back and forth, right? They built the houses, but then when they migrated, they destroyed the houses. And so
that doesn't make sense.
I know. And so it's just this, but this went on for decades and decades. The government and park staff tried to force them out, but nothing was working because these people, obviously, to live in Death Valley, these are the hardiest people in the world.
Right.
They're so tough. And so how do you make something more uncomfortable for people who already live in Death Valley?
Right. Yeah.
It's kind of my thought process. And so I don't think that the government or the park staff at the time knew what they were up against.
Right.
And so, but finally, in 1983, after 50 years, the Timbisha Shoshone people finally won federal tribe recognition. But it still didn't come with any land of their own. And so they were just now, congratulations, you're in the system.
Right.
Kind of a thing. And so they kept fighting. And this is where we get to fun fact number 5. Fun fact number 5 is that thanks to decades and decades of hard work and activism, in the year 2000, legislation was finally signed making Death Valley National Park the first and only U.S. national park to return lands and create a reservation within its boundaries.
Oh, interesting. So they lobbied so hard for themselves that they got their land back.
They did.
In Death Valley. Booyah. Good job, guys.
Yeah. And so the Timbisha Shoshone Homeland Act provided the tribe with 300 acres of land at Furnace Creek and over 7,000 acres of land outside the park, so they can retain their strong ties to their native homeland. And so I just think that's amazing. We thought getting your name changed with the DMV was impossible.
Dude, the government red tape is just... I was talking to somebody about this the other day because he emailed me. He's noticed an error on one of the signs at Grand Teton.
Uh-huh.
And he was like, do you have someone that like you could talk to maybe, you know, let them know that this needs to be fixed? And I'm like, no, because in my experience, when I worked as a park ranger, it was like nothing gets done fast ever. Nothing.
Exactly.
So the fact that they had to fight for their land for 50 years, or actually longer than that, right? Because it was 2000.
Yeah.
So like 70 years.
Fighting with a government bureaucracy
gosh.
that doesn't even recognize that you exist.
Oh my gosh. I just cannot imagine how frustrating that would be, because that was a big part of working for the Park Service that I hated.
Right.
Was the inefficiencies, because I'm just like let's do it this way as quickly as we can. And, you know, like, I don't know, I can solve any problem in 5 minutes.
Right.
And it's like, why is this taking years?
Yes.
I could have solved this in 5 minutes. So that
Maybe just go out to that wooden sign with a chisel and
well, that's what the guy, he was like, all it would take is like a Sharpie and some whiteout. I could just fix it real fast.
Oh my gosh.
But surprisingly, actually, he followed up and he did get through to somebody at Grand Teton, and they said they'd have it reprinted within a couple weeks. And I was like, wow. That's unheard of for something to happen that fast. Don't they have like 50 channels they have to go through before they make a new sign?
Yeah.
But anyway.
That's crazy.
So that was one part of being a park ranger that just absolutely drove me crazy, because I do not deal well with inefficiencies.
Right.
So I can't imagine having to fight just to become recognized as a tribe.
Right.
Like, that would just be so irritating.
Oh my gosh.
Like, obviously, we're here and we're a tribe. Why is this not happening?
Yeah, exactly. I know.
So good for them. Those are my kind of people, man. Like,
I know.
You gotta stick it to the system sometimes.
I know. That's so great. I just thought that was such an amazing story.
Did they get their land out, like their wintering grounds? Is that what the other section was, or is it not the same wintering grounds? Because
I don't know exactly, because that other 7,000 acres is not contiguous. Like, I think it's sections here, basically. But the 300 acres, I think, is one big block in Furnace Creek.
Yeah.
Right. So I can't exactly, I don't know. The human history is so amazing here at Death Valley, but I just thought that the native people being able to live and thrive here seemed so impossible. And then working through the government seemed so impossible. And then their story just deserved to be told. What an extreme place, right?
Yeah.
Death Valley National Park, the hottest place on Earth, the driest and lowest place in North America, continually messing with the physics of it all, and filled with amazing people.
Okay, so now it's time for your task. We made it to the end of the episode. Today, we would love for you to head over to the Dirt in My Shoes Instagram or Facebook page and let us know what aspect of Death Valley's extremes you're most excited to experience. So whether you want to experience that extreme heat because it's the hottest place in the world, or if you want to go to the lowest elevation in North America, if you're most excited for that, or if you just want to feel how dry and barren this place is and look for all those erosion channels where the water just flows off the mountains.
Yeah, the rare time that it does rain.
But you can see the effects of that when you go. So what are you most excited to see when you go to Death Valley? Let us know. We'll have a post over on our socials where you can comment and let us know what you're most excited to experience in Death Valley National Park.
Right. And if you wouldn't mind, we would also love it if you could give the Exploring the National Parks podcast a 5-star review. We sure appreciate all of those of you who have done that, and we really look forward to reading those. And if you get a chance, go get some really hot dirt in your shoes.